Well, good morning, everyone, from Mystery Island Studio here in Southern Maryland, USA, on the East Coast, where it's 11:01 a.m. on Friday, the 14th, isn't it? The 15th of July? 15th of July, thank you. And welcome. We are on McDuff Lives 1, McDuff Lives 3 on YouTube, and McDuff on Facebook. And I'm enjoying seeing the Facebook audience build. Thank you all for checking in, and hello to everyone. Thanks for being with me. And it's a Friday opportunity for us to really pay attention to the chat, as I'm often not able to do. So, hello to Barbara Kay and Kate Godina, and I'm happy to consider any topics you guys want to talk about. Um, in the week so far, I've really been blown away by a number of things. Um, One of them I was just reading from a blog on Substack called Spartacus. And this one is about the response to the pandemic. And in particular, I think he makes a tremendous point about how important nutrition is and vitamins. And he says that pescatarians are getting the best vaccine just through their consumption of being vegetarian plus fish is pescatarian. I had to look it up, but that's what it is. So I'm a pescatarian. I do venture into the turkey a little bit once in a while, maybe Thanksgiving, but mainly, we eat fish a couple times a month, if not three or not once a week. But we eat a lot of vegetables, a lot of legumes, a lot of muesli, and that's, I think so. As far as diet is concerned, we're in good shape. I should get more exercise though. But isn't that what the point of the article really is? That yes, there is a lot of bad stuff out there. It's very much uh, compromise the lungs. And the problem with the lungs is that you need micronutrients, you need vitamins, you need the kind of things that come from veggies and fish. And most people have been seduced away from a diet like that. Of course, I was, I'm took me, 50 years or more to start eating um, a nutritious food. And I have to credit drummer my wife for that. But also just read about it. My goodness, it's so important that we get away from the standard American diet. It's just not going to prevent disease. We need to eat things that are going to help us prevent disease. Yeah. Hey, Brightmore. Yeah. Okay. Fish, fruits, nuts, and veggies. Yeah. I love trout too. They have trout farms in West Virginia where we went on vacation a year or two ago, and we drove by one of those trout farms and thought, that's not so bad. The idea of corporate salmon farming does trouble me, but a small trout farm, where they just breed them and let them grow and then sell them. I mean, that makes sense to me. Anyway, they are very, very good eating. Hey, David, how are you, man? By the way, if anybody wants to jump in on video, I will send you a link. Just say um, say so on the chat, and I'll send you a link, and we can join you up to the video link, including you, David. If you have anything you want to talk about that you want to go a little more in depth with me, let's go ahead and do it. Aquaponic farming, says Harry Cannon. Yeah, there's a lot of talk about that. I was just reading a document called NASA hyphen Future Wars, and it's amazing the things that they have lined up that we don't talk about, but NASA does in their private meetings. And one of them is to grow a whole lot of biomass just beneath the surface of the water. So that's what maybe what you're talking about, aquaponic farming. Well, Mark Kulak has been getting strikes again. He published on Wednesday night, and then he appealed it. And this morning we find of course, like they do, they almost always deny your appeal, and it seems like it's just another AI bot that's reading the appeals and saying, "Oh no, no way." So, but he publishes right away on BitChute, and that's where you can see his show, and it's really worthwhile. His direction right now has been in trying to pinpoint what the next goal is of the people behind the the so-called pandemic. What are they going to do next? And he presents a number of pieces of evidence that they are looking toward young women of childbearing age so that they can see what happens when their juice is inside of a woman who becomes pregnant. Does that pass through to the newborn? And if so, what can they do? How can they make use of that to achieve their purposes? Of course, we don't know what their purposes are because they don't tell us. It's certainly beyond the the idea that they're trying to keep us healthy. It's got to be more to it than that. And I don't know. I do not know. I was reading an article, as I just said, um, by Spartacus on Substack, and it appears that his idea is that by releasing the pathogen that we call, um, well, you know what we call it, right? By letting it um, letting it circulate without doing any contact tracing, without doing anything towards containing it, that it was a deliberate act, whether the initial case was accidental or intentional. The failure to contain it and the failure to do contact tracing shows that there was an intent that this be spread. And he relates it to SARS, and he says it's just so much like SARS. The actual when people get sick, the disease itself is very SARS-like, but that they didn't examine it to be SARS-like. They examined it as if it were a novel pneumonia that nobody had ever seen before, and so the the science was thrown off, and people that wanted to study it were directed, by the authorities to what turns out to be not an effective way to contain or treat a new SARS type virus. Well, that writer concludes that it's an intentional uh, genocide of old folks and folks who have compromised immune systems. And he cites the fact that it will eliminate a lot of Social Security and health care and Medicare payments that would otherwise be due as these folks age and encounter health problems. So he sees it kind of the way I was thinking before I started studying what Mark's working on that it is a a control of the population technique, that there's too many humans for them to sustain their hegemony, their rule over the rest of us, and they need to reduce the population to a manageable size while they're imposing totalitarian means to keep us under control anyway, so that, in the not too distant future, we will virtually be serfs working on a colonial economy where we give up our labor and they give us a little bit of food and a short lifespan to enjoy. In other words, the British imperial system. So the other aspect of it that comes from Mark, of course, is, well, they really are working on curing disease, and that this is probably headed towards a kind of a extension of lifespan as a secret goal. If they can figure out all the things that cause us to age by doing experiments on the whole world population, then they can gradually eliminate the process of aging for themselves and those of their choice, and create really a godlike status for a certain few, turning the rest of us into expendable or usable human energy material. And that's also, I think, quite feasible. And then we haven't yet even talked about the use of them as pathogens as biological weapons of war. And that, of course, is the topic of the U.S. Air Force talk that I posted on Twitter yesterday. Um, how close are they to creating one of what they call 6 different kinds of biological weapons based on pathogens? Well, let's see if we've got, what do we got? AI McCoy. Does that mean that you are AI? No, I'm just kidding. Maybe you're Al. Anyway, I'm beginning to believe the efforts to destroy social contract between citizens and governments. Yeah, right. That's it. It is chaos. They do want, this is the whole Phoenix theory, is from the chaos the Phoenix rises, and they consider themselves to be the Phoenix. The rest of us will all just be molten carbon material left behind and forgotten about. A Ferris wheel greenhouse could be automated and guarantee food safety. I love that. I absolutely right, Harry. And so many other ways that we could guarantee food safety that is just ridiculous. It is ridiculous. This is a little discussion I got in with Dr. Paul Cottrell yesterday. Well, I'm okay. It's provocative, but what I say is, I'm not impressed that NASA can fly a helicopter on Mars. I'd be impressed if NASA would devote its scientific expertise to solving the hunger problem. That, if you want to impress me, do something, that helps us here on Earth, you know, and but on the other hand, you have the argument that, well, you have to have scientific progress or else nothing gets better, and it's only through spending huge amounts of our capital on exploratory things that you make progress in humanity. And I see that argument, and I reject it. I think the way to make progress in humanity is to solve the problems of humanity. Not to create science fiction futures and then work towards them. Let's see. Oh, there's a troll. Just a second. Ready? Gone. The cops are in on the show. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know where at what level it starts. I don't know if the average county, sheriff's department, you know, the rank and file, are they in on it? Do they know? But I do believe that when you get to the top of police departments, that they've been into the JTTF, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, and all the FBI training, and so just really ready to comply if an order comes down from the feds. So yeah, I don't know where the line is. I don't know if there's any sheriff's departments or police departments out there that are openly opposing cooperation with the feds when SHTF. I don't know. Um, John, as a lawyer, can you tell us why a citizen's arrest of Hunter Biden would work? Why it would work or would not work? It would not work because you can't do that. It's just you can't. It's just it's a dead end, and you'll just get in trouble. The idea of citizens arrests is just doesn't happen anymore. You can't get a you can't prosecute somebody as a citizen anymore. You can't have like a citizen's grand jury. The courts have pretty much thrown all of that out, and that's a shame. I think it's part of the judicial system that we inherited, and the idea that citizens can't be the prosecutors of crime when they see it right in front of their face and there's nobody else going to prosecute is wrong. But nevertheless, that's where we're at. Yeah. Describing the new incarnation of the Nazi plans. Yeah. I use the word Nazi. I think it's a fair appellation, but a lot of people get confused by it, and it's really uh, a difficult word to use to convince people that already don't have an open mind, because it sounds like you're just throwing mud at something. You call somebody a Nazi. Well, it's like, you're calling the Ukrainian uh, privy sector or right sector, it's called, or the Azov battalion, or any of the avowedly racist, nationalist, fascist army groups there. If you call them Nazis, then it doesn't work. The people don't catch, that you're really saying, yes, they really are Nazis. They think you're just throwing an, an expletive at them. So I don't know. Mismanagement is the new management, says Corky. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, thanks, Jimmy. Yeah, no problem. It happens. Fourth Reich, well on the march. Yeah. Yeah, Jim Mars's book, The Rise of the Fourth Reich, is really, I think, predictive and worth your having a copy of it. I read it on my show. You can still find, I think I still have a couple of parts of it up, but most of it got took down by the gods of YouTube. Yeah, Tyro, I'm with you. Yeah, the Nazi philosophies that came to prominence in the 30s. That's right. But you can't convince somebody else that that's what you're talking about, because they just think of, oh, you're just calling him Hitler. You're just throwing a bad name around without knowledge of why, and that's where they're wrong. But you can't convince them. One of the people that David Underdan was talking about the other day is Eric. No, maybe it was Mark Kulak on Wednesday. Maybe it was both of them. Anyway, Eric Traub is an important person, and unless we have something else on our minds, I think maybe I'll just spend a minute going through his Wikipedia. So share a few thoughts about him. So Eric Traub was a German veterinarian. And how many times do we start these examinations of viruses and vaccines with a veterinarian? It's often a veterinarian, scientist and virologist who specialized in foot and mouth disease, rinderpest, and Newcastle disease. Traub was a member of the National Socialist Motor Corps, a Nazi motorist corps from 1938 to 42. He worked directly for Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, as the lab chief of the Nazis' leading bioweapons facility on Reims Island. Reims Island is a little island off of the north coast of Germany next to a larger island called Rügen Island. And it is where they have done some, obviously uh, very, very dark and scary stuff. They always pick islands, and obviously they think they can contain it, but sometimes things don't get contained, do they? Traub was rescued from the Soviet zone of Germany after World War II and taken to the United States in 1949 under the auspices of Operation Paperclip. This is what Mark was saying was, wait a minute, hey, this guy can't be a paperclip. He was at the Rockefeller Institute for Medicine in Princeton, New Jersey during the 1930s. So he's not somebody we rescued and saved. He's somebody we brought back who we had sent over there and was there during the war. And now, because what was he doing at Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research? And here it is. During the 1930s, he studied on a fellowship at the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research in Princeton, New Jersey, mentored by Richard Shope. Again, another subject of Mark's presentation the other night, performing research on vaccines and viruses, including pseudo-rabies virus and lymphocytic choriomeningitis virus. Sounds awful, doesn't it? During his stay in the United States, Traub and his wife were listed as members of the German-American Bund, a pro-Nazi German-American club 30 miles west of Plum Island in Yaphank, Long Island. Well, Plum Island is where the the United States had its own bioweapons lab. And who ran it? Well, Traub did. The motorist corps he was in was declared a condemned but not a criminal organization at the Nuremberg trials. Wasn't that convenient? They were running around doing the things that Himmler said, working for Himmler, the head of the SS, right? But they weren't war criminals. Yeah, sure. From 1942 to 48, Traub worked as lab chief at the Reich Research Institute for Virus Diseases of Animals on Reims Island, a German animal virus research institute in the Baltic Sea, now named the Friedrich Loeffler Institute. The institute was headed by Professor Dr. Otto Waltmann, while Traub was vice president. The institute at Reims Island was a dual-use facility during the Second World War, where at least some biological warfare experiments were conducted. It has been founded in 1909 to tend to study foot and mouth disease in animals, and by World War II employed about 20 scientists and a staff of 70 to 120. Hans Christoph Nagel, a veterinarian and biological warfare expert for the German army, conducted experiments there, as did Traub. The institute was administered under the Innenministerium, which Reichsfuhrer SS Heinrich Himmler took over in 1943. The chain of command was Himmler, Dr. Leonardo Conti, who was a real creep, the one that imposed sterilization on Germans, if they were blind or had various conditions, just, hundreds of thousands of, these are Germans that, so what else would he would do to anybody else there's no limit. Kurt Blome, who also comes to America, Waldman, and then Traub. Traub specialized in viral and bacterial diseases. Traub worked on weaponizing foot and mouth disease virus, which has been reported to have been dispersed by aircraft onto cattle and reindeer in Russia. In 1944, Blome sent Traub to pick up a strain of rinderpest virus in Turkey. Upon his return, the strain proved inactive. Immediately after the war, Traub was trapped in the Soviet zone of Allied-occupied Germany. He was forced to work for the Soviets from his lab on Reims Island. He was forced to work for the Soviets from his lab on Reims Island. In July 1948, the British evacuated Erich Traub from Reims Island as a high-priority intelligence target, since it was now in the Soviet zone, and they feared that Traub was assisting in their biological warfare program. Traub denied this, however, claiming his only interest was foot and mouth disease in animals. Well, you can conduct biological warfare against animals, especially in the wartime, when you want to kill their horses, you want to kill their cattle, you want to kill their pigs, you want to deny them of the use of their animals through biological warfare. And, how far is it to humans? Well, that's what they're working on. Traub was brought to the United States under the auspices of Operation Paperclip. He was associated from 1949 to 53. So the British gave him to us, I guess. From 1949 to 53, he was associated with the Naval Medical Research Institute in Bethesda, Maryland. Traub was asked to meet with U.S. scientists from Fort Detrick, the Army's biological warfare headquarters. As a noted German authority on viruses, he was asked to consult on their animal disease program from a biological warfare perspective. Traub discussed work at the Reich Research Institute for Virus Diseases of Animals on Reims Island during World War II for the Nazis, and work done after the war there for the Russians. Traub gave a detailed explanation of the secret operation at the Institute and his activities there. This information provided the groundwork for Fort Detrick's offshore germ warfare animal disease lab on Plum Island. Well, I hadn't really made that connection before. That the Plum Island Disease Lab was a Fort Detrick offshoot. His publicly published research from his time in the United States reports disease research not directly related to weaponization. All right, let's skip the stuff about chickens. Oh, look at his tombstone. Can you see that? It's an obelisk. In 1964, Traub published a study for the Army Biological Labs in Frederick, Maryland on Eastern equine encephalomyelitis immunity in white mice and its relationship to lymphocytic choriomeningitis, which had long been a research interest of his. So, encephalomyelitis is, if I'm not mistaken, that is related to this brain disease that I'm not sure if that's a prion disease or whether it is a kind of a Zika-like problem, but this idea of taking encephalitis as as a vector for weaponizing disease goes back a long way. I'm not enough of a scientist to say, whether there's any real connection there. I just suggest it to those of you that know more than I do. In theory, insects of all types, particularly the biting species, can be used as disease vectors in a biological warfare program. Germany, Japan, Britain, Russia, and the US all conducted experiments along these lines during the Second World War, and the Japanese used such insect-borne diseases against both soldiers and civilians in China. This was one reason that President Franklin Roosevelt and Secretary of War Henry Stimson ordered the creation of an American biological warfare program in 1942, which was headquartered at Camp Detrick, Maryland. This eventually grew to a very large facility with 245 buildings and a $60 million budget, including an entomological weapons department. Entomological meaning bugs, right? And that mass produced flies, lice, and mosquitoes as disease vectors. Although the British bioweapon facility at Porton Down concentrated on the production of anthrax bombs, it also conducted experiments on insects as vectors. After the war, the Army's 406th Medical General Laboratory in Japan cooperated with former scientists from Unit 731 in experimenting with many different insect vectors, including lice, flies, mosquitoes, ticks, fleas, spiders, and beetles, to carry a wide variety of diseases from cholera to meningitis. At Fort Detrick in the late 40s, Theodore Rosebery also rated insect vectors very highly, and its entomological division had at least 3 insect vectors weapons ready for use by 1950. Some of these were later tested at Dugway Proving Grounds in Utah and allegedly used during the Korean War as well. Traub visited the Plum Island Animal Disease Center in New York on at least 3 occasions in the 1950s. The Plum Island facility, operated by the Department of Agriculture, conducted research on foot and mouth disease of cattle, one of Traub's areas of expertise. Traub was offered a leading position at Plum Island in 1958, which he officially declined. It has been alleged that the United States performed bioweapons research on Plum Island. It's been alleged. Okay. Fort Terry on Plum Island was part of the U.S. biological warfare program in 1944 to 46, working on veterinary testing in connection with the weaponization of brucellosis. After the war, research on biological weapons continued at Pine Bluff in Arkansas and Fort Detrick, Maryland, while officially, at least, Plum Island was transferred to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. From 1949, Plum Island also conducted work on biological weapons against animals and livestock, such as foot and mouth disease, rinderpest, Newcastle disease, African swine fever, and plague, and malaria in birds. Traub's research work on the Second World War onward involved at least the first 3 of these, all dangerous only to non-human animal species, parentheses, and close parentheses. See also Edgewood Arsenal, Project MK Ultra, Project MK Naomi, Klaus Schilling, Zygmunt Rascher, Kurt Blome, and Fort Detrick. Yeah, there's Kurt Blome. Was a high-ranking Nazi scientist before and during World War II. He was the deputy Reich Health leader and plenipotentiary for cancer research in the Reich Research Council. They call cancer research, I think that's also what you might call dual use. All right, back to you guys. In ancient times, dead animals were put into wells. Yes, indeed. And the use of dead bodies as weapons goes back as far as warfare itself. Albert Pike laid out the plans for the three world wars. Yeah, the only trouble with that is that nobody can prove the progeny of it. Where did that document come from? How did it get published? And is it a genuine Albert Pike document? It's still a very important document. I don't mean it is not. That's You get tied up in little disputes about whether whether the author is correct, is trustworthy, you know, but then you distract yourself from the contents of it. And I think reading the contents of it is really important because you see that if it wasn't Albert Pike, somebody thought it up enough to write it out. And, although there's a little bit of anachronism in it, I think it definitely captures somebody's plan for the future. And it's consistent with what's happening, in my opinion. I agree with you. Our government was infiltrated from the beginning, says Scott NYC. Yeah, I guess so. If you listen to what we were talking about with um, what's his name that killed Hamilton, Aaron Burr, I think he's definitely been shown to be an infiltrator, and he was uh, very high in the government. And then, of course, we have the interesting character of Albert Gallatin from Geneva heritage, the same Geneva heritage of the Malay Provost family. And the Malay Provost family was involved in uh, early purchases of large amounts of land, connection in New York, where uh, Aaron Burr was able to arrange the purchases of millions of acres by his clients of newly opened former frontier land in New York State that created these huge, what can you call them? They're almost nobility if you own that much land, and you control what goes on in you know land that covers dozens of counties. Yeah, I think we definitely were infiltrated. Doesn't mean that we were turned. Yeah, George Washington was definitely a Mason, and there's no question about it. But the Masons are maybe trying to make a little more out of that than George Washington himself did. Um, I visited the Masonic Temple over there in Alexandria, 333 feet tall. Yeah, it is. The Washington Monument's 555 feet tall, and the Masonic Temple is 333 feet tall. And of course, that is just a architectural coincidence. Of course, because the Masons don't really make things look like Kabbalistic. Well, maybe they do. Yeah, maybe they do. Yeah, uh, the relationship between Scottish Freemasonry, and that's what Southern Rite, Albert Pike Freemasonry is. It's Scottish, and the Jewish Kabbalah tradition is a huge thing we haven't studied much. There is a woman named Marcia Schuchard, Schuchard, who publishes on that subject. And I've been reading some of her stuff that's somehow gotten to me via a website called Academia, where if you get on their list, they start pushing articles at you that they think you want to read. Well, I found out I did want to read it. It's all about the intersection of Scottish Freemasonry and Judaism in the 1600s, 1700s, as as the Jacobean era was beginning in England. Tyro Fusion says, unfortunately, There is nothing that can be done now to change the vector of America's republic death spiral. It happens to nations over time. The grand experiment is in a nosedive. Well, I disagree. I think that as we uncover this stuff, that the American people are still wise enough to throw off these chains, just like they threw off the chains of Great Britain. I think so. I think people have an inner sense of freedom and an inner abhorrence of slavery that can't be defeated. They can suppress it. They can suppress it with fear, suppress it with scary headlines. Frank Zappa's song, "There's no way to delay that trouble coming every day." That's the news. So I don't think so. Blut und Ehre, says Tyro Fusion. Yeah, blood and honor. Um, I don't think so. I think that that's the trouble. That's the trouble. Is that's the European default. Is we are we are the blood of the soil. The soil. When we die, our blood goes into the soil and it nourishes the next generations. And it's very much of of an old pagan idea, the tree of life, or that dragon that eats his tail. Um, that's not our philosophy as Americans. We have we have hope, and we believe that there's more to life than what you can value in dollars and cents. At least that's the way I believe. Real Americans are a dying breed, says Barbara. I don't know. That reminds me of General MacArthur and his comment, of old soldiers never die; they just fade away. And I wonder, when people like General Arthur Trudeau went to MacArthur and said, "Hey, you see what the CIA is doing. You see what these totalitarian, oligarchical, um, you know, control freaks of New England and Wall Street and the old world banking system are doing, and we need to do something about it." Well, MacArthur said that'll have to be the next generation, because I am now 71 years old and I'm not the person to lead it. So he stepped back. And I guess, as I approach my 70s, and I'm getting very close, I think, at what point am I going to have to say I'm stepping back? Because I don't think our minds remain acute forever, with a lot of exceptions. But if there's things that I need to say, I feel it's very important that I say them. I want to say it now. I want to get you guys to be thinking about it, whether it's what's the real thing behind the scenes of this, uh, you know, f- incredible past 2 years of pandemic. What's coming next? I think Mark's probably right. They are looking for um, childbearing age women to experiment on next. That's my opinion, my guess. I don't know if YouTube is going to strike my channel too, just because I said that. But without, we have to keep trying. We have to keep pressing the boundaries of free speech, or they will just take it. They'll take it away. Yeah, the youth are so brainwashed. But don't you think that they know that they're starting to realize, that 'cause we did. I mean, when I was in college, we could see that the media was just feeding us a bunch of garbage. I think kids can see that. They get discouraged and turn away from trying to solve it, though. That's the problem is if you can get depressed and then you turn to alcohol, you know. And I think alcohol is the gateway drug of all gateway drugs. The real thing behind it is Satan, says Tyro. Well, I think so too, in a way. Uh, I think the way I like to think of it is God is all of the stuff that I can't see and can't understand that has created this world that I live in. And Satan is the absence of God, the absence of a belief in something more than what you can count out in dollar bills or stacks of coins. What we call British empiricism, the idea that if it doesn't have monetary value, it doesn't have any value. And that's the way their ethics work with the British East India Company and the Dutch East India Company and the whole idea of corporations is to make money for the shareholders. It's not to provide a service to humanity. It's not to ensure the moral disposition of assets. It's not there for anything else. And yeah, so I see, a lot of folks do agree with you, Beppy, that Satan is a real being, not an idea. I I'm not sure of, whether he is or is not a real being, but that's not important. I think we have the idea of satanic action, and being satanic is acting as if you your will is more important than the good of your fellow humans. It's acting like a tyrant. That's why I like the idea of sic semper tyrannis, thus always to tyrants. It's the motto of the Commonwealth of Virginia, right across the river, where their flag has a picture of Lady Justice with a sword in her hand, where she has just stuck it into a tyrant who is lying dead on the ground. Sic semper tyrannis. That's the problem, is that folks are not able to see the tyranny that is driving our lives right now. We're not able to see behind the curtain to who is it that we need to grab that sword of justice and thrust it into them. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about how do we find the guys or women or whatever they are that are behind the curtain pulling the levers. Jimmy Beam, I think there is a satanic type of spirit taking hold of people. How many people would actually stop a fight or just record it? Well, again, this is a psychological operation. Those of us that were alive in the 60s remember a huge New York Times expose, a story about a woman who I don't know if she got what happened to her. She was beat up, I guess. And the point was that there was a crowd of people that were there and walked by and didn't stop to do anything about it. And that was the big story. And everybody was like horrified that, oh, how can that be? That in itself was probably set up to provide through the New York Times and other news outlets that they all work together, the idea that we're now different, that now we walk past uh, tragedies that happen to our fellow humans. that now we don't follow that golden rule anymore. We're not going to help somebody in distress. We're going to keep walking by. And if you sense that that's what people are doing, it's because we've been under a psychological warfare regime that is teaching us to do that, that is separating us, just like separating us into separate rooms and buildings with lockdowns, and just taking away our sense of belonging to a greater thing than ourselves, something greater than me, whether it's a community, a church, a family, a country, something greater than myself, and reduce us all into a bunch of egotistical um, pleasure seekers. That's what they want. They want you to be responsive to pleasure and pain, the perfect slave, you know? Do what I want, you get a nice meal. Don't do what I want, I'll beat the shit out of you. Get my whip out, you know, and I will beat the crap out of you. So what do you want, pleasure or pain? I love this quote from St. Paul. Um, for we don't wrestle with flesh of this earth, but principalities and spiritual wickedness in high office. Yeah, um, I think that's absolutely right. Um, that to me, yeah, that's pretty close to saying I believe in Satan, because I do believe in the the power of such a spiritual force that it overtakes, say, um, well, anybody. I mean, like a Himmler. We were talking about Heinrich Himmler before, a man who grew up as a chicken farmer, trained by the Jesuits. Whether he became a Jesuit, I think he probably was a secret Jesuit, but he became somebody that admired the Jesuit order, which is total obedience. And so he built his SS around a totalitarian, total obedience, do what I say or die, regime. And that's just exactly what you read about if you study the way that the Jesuits got control of governments and people. Is are the Jesuits behind what's going on now? I don't know. I don't know, but I do have some questions that I think need to be addressed to the Jesuits about Carol Quigley, about Georgetown, about slaves, and the perpetuation of the myth of racism, the myth of white superiority, the myth of the inability of certain races to conduct, you know, intellectual activity or understand complicated things, the myths that were spread in the name of education to shape society in the way that they wanted. The story of the Jesuits in the New World is a huge story that could be very illustrative of forces behind the scenes, if not actual proof of what's going on now. So I do, yeah. Barbara, pride goeth before the fall, yeah, and that's what happened to Lucifer. Okay, well, somehow Lucifer ended up down here, but we don't want him either. So I think our duty is clear to uh, eh, to help people understand that these forces behind the scenes, whether you call it satanic or not, they are evil. They are the kind of things that destroy uh, love, that destroy families, that destroy traditions and cultures and respect and ability to learn and respect for learning and the idea of reason and using your brain to figure things out. You know, it's what I got from my parents. I was so lucky, that my dad, wouldn't. explain things to me, he'd just say, he would say something, or and that would be it. If I didn't understand it, it was up to me to figure it out. And that developed my ability to reason. And then using things like learning a language to learn how to use your brain to to understand logic and understand how we put sentences and thoughts together, thinking of the brain as a tool that needs to be oiled and worked on and educated and prepared for the reality of life where we face these questions, and we want to be human. We don't want to be serfs. We don't want to be, obedient, happy slaves like Mr. Klaus Schwab would like to make us. We just can't do it. Jimmy, you canceled your Netflix. Bravo to you. We still have it here. There's some movies we get in foreign languages. We like to watch things in Italian and French. Just we don't speak those languages, but we studied them in school. Marcia and I did, and we enjoy watching them with subtitles. Other than that, I would cancel Netflix for sure because of the things they produce are just disgusting. Enkidu, you're here. So glad to have you here. What do you say? Currently, eugenicists promote their racism based on genetics. Yeah, as Mark Kulak at Housatonic said the other day, he said, and he's right. He says, genetics is the new eugenics. Genetics is eugenics. And that's what we're talking about. It's the idea that you can decide what part of humanity is worth saving and what part is just useless, and the world would be better off if we just canceled that little gene set. Just take one of those little letters out of the genetic DNA sequence and you get rid of people who annoy you, people who challenge your reasoning, people who don't do as they're told. We could get rid of those people. Just a little bit of genetic engineering. Yeah, that's what I call evil. Okay, well, I enjoyed it. I hope you all did too. A wide-ranging Friday morning discussion and some new thoughts to consider for me. And thank you all for your contributions. One more from Enkidu, as long as we're got another minute. Therefore, as long as anyone uses the wrong notions, it's impossible to escape the manipulation by neuro-linguistic programming. Yes, NLP. I need to know more about neuro-linguistic programming, and let's make a date to talk about that another time. And Enkidu, if you want to come on and talk about it, I'd be delighted to have you as a guest, either on camera or off. Um, Anyway, you can reach me at koproductionsusa@gmail.com. Send me an email if you would. I haven't been in touch with you offline in a long time, and I've lost your contact information. Okay, everybody, thanks a lot. We'll see you Monday.